I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Retention as a Service agency, Electric, as well as the co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Andy Hilliard, who's the founder and CEO of Accelerance, which is the premier global outsourcing advisor that delivers top-tier software development resources along with professional consulting services. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Brandon. Pleased to be here.
So before we dive into things, can you give everybody just a quick background on yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm CEO of Accelerance. We help companies build globally distributed, effective software development ecosystems and functions. I guess real quick as I can do it. My background, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. Went to grad school at Kellogg. Joined Cognizant. Most people should probably know who that is. A global services provider, primarily based in India, or at least initially based in India. I joined them mid 90s as one of their first divisional managers. So imagine, 700 IIT software engineering grads. They were a spinout actually of Dun & Bradstreet. And when Dun & Bradstreet figured out that the world was going digital and services could be rendered at a much higher profitability and growth rate than just serving an internal function within Dun & Bradstreet. And in the 3 years that I was there, they went from 700 people and probably 10 Americans like myself as division managers to 20,000 software engineers. And from there, there are 380,000 people now. So you can imagine just the global demand over the last 20 years of digitalization. Everyone's gone digital. So spent about 3 years there, and I'd mentioned I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica. After about 3 years, I saw that the world of digitalization was the haves and have-nots. Basically, you had tier one service providers, the IBMs, Accentures, Cognizants, Wipros, Infosys, serving Fortune 1000 companies because each of them were scaling at massive levels. But frankly, the other 98% of the marketplace, small and mid-sized companies, they didn't have access to the quality of engineers, the quality of processes, the quality of partners, and there was just a mismatch of a supply of service providers that were poorly run and a massive demand from the Western world essentially for digital services. And so I decided to quit Cognizant, moved back to Costa Rica, started a software development firm there in 2003. And we grew to about 350 people over 4 years. Not only that, there was so much demand for nearshore for small and mid-sized companies that we couldn't handle the demand ourselves. So essentially, I took it upon myself and took a team to start traveling throughout Latin America and the rest of the world in order to vet, assess, certify other small to mid-sized software service firms to serve that clientele. There was that much demand. And frankly, the demand was all over the world. There was, demand for Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, big teams, small teams, more expensive, less expensive, certain technology stacks, certain verticals. And so my philosophy is to find and certify the best service providers, that were proven, trusted, vetted by ourselves, large enough to scale, small enough to care, somewhere between like 100 and 1,000 engineers. So they've been around. They're not just fly-by-nights, right? They're legitimate software engineering firms that each had a specialization in certain things, certain verticals, certain tech stacks. So essentially, that's how I built Accelerance. So today, we're a global network of about 65 software partners around the world in 32 countries, and we help companies not only find the ideal relationship, the ideal match, based on experiences and criteria and requirements and preferences and such. But we also help them build that ecosystem that I talked about. Like, how can you take a relationship and then optimize the results?
What are some of the common pitfalls that you see when a company does decide that they want to start nearshoring and they maybe don't enlist the help of an expert like yourself?
Sure. The first thing, there's many pitfalls. Let me start with maybe the top three or top four, and
Mm.
that is um, they try to do it themselves. They try with all the platforms that exist today, with all the venues that they have and ways in which they can find talent. They believe that they have the control and the wisdom or experience or smarts in order to pull that off themselves. And they typically go find individuals. There's a couple problems with that. One is that there are literally millions of individuals. Two is the person or the company does not know how to vet and acquire and compile and embed and integrate and create a high performing culture out of those individuals. So all of those weak spots about finding the right people, vetting the right people, onboarding, training, retaining, building a culture, building accountability, building processes, building continual improvement. All of that is sort of shortchanged when companies typically try to do it themselves. My philosophy is we're all let's say we're all experts in one thing or two things, right? We're 98% experts, and maybe with technology and platforms, we're somewhere between like 2 and 10% of expert in the other 10,000 things in this world. And you have to figure out what your lane is, and you have to figure out what your other, all the other 10,000 things that you are going to encounter or need to get done. That's where you need to pull in experts. And frankly, you're wasting your time if like I can learn this. I have ChatGPT. I have platforms. I'm smart. And that's frankly just a huge waste of value. There are smart people and smart processes out there that you can leverage right away without having to spend months or years and countless failures trying to figure out how to do something else.
Are there particular like regions that you prefer, over others when it comes to this type of work?
So, I had mentioned we have about 60 partners in 32 countries,
Yeah.
pretty evenly split between Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Every client is different. Every client's needs are different. Every client's experiences and preferences are different. They've and and obviously then you get into sort of the hard scoring things like tech stack or application type or vertical expertise. And so what my preference is not your preference or anyone else's preferences. I think
Mm.
it really comes down to is identifying and weighing those things that are important based on the collective needs, experiences, and preferences of a client to figure out what is the right location and what is the right partner and what is the right culture to bring in. So again, you don't have to learn these things through trial and error. You can do the requirements and analysis part up front, do the scorecarding up front,
Mm.
and then choose whatever is right for you.
Yeah, I've definitely, at least with the previous businesses, there have been pros and cons to like particular regions as it comes to, the work culture or even little things like time zone differences. Being on the
Yeah.
West Coast, it's easier to work with certain, teams versus being on the East Coast. So, when you're engaging with with a client, how do you sort of suss out what sort of capabilities they need from a resource standpoint? Like, is it 10 people? Is it 20? And then how do you go about, actually integrating them into the team in a way that they care about like the long-term success of the project versus just like executing against the tasks that are in front of them?
Sure. Well, we go through a couple of hours of just storytelling, anecdotes, Q&A, requirements gathering, just to get a feel and understanding of how decisions are made, what their vision is, what their experience is, what their preferences are. Tell me stories about how you've done this in the past and what you felt worked well and what didn't work well. So we go through a good deal of time just talking and getting to know one another.
Mm.
And then we take all of this information and we put it into, we have a massive, so in addition to our 60 partners, for example, we scorecard like 10,000 software development firms. We just happen to maintain 60 certified partners because they essentially cover the gamut. For example, if you wanted the best, Latin American entertainment industry augmented reality software development firm, and you need a team of, let's say hypothetically 5 to 25 people, we know the best partner for that. We've visited them, we've assessed them, we've talked to all their clients, we've talked to their business leaders, practice leaders, senior developers, and we understand what their processes are and how they deliver outcomes to clients. We've traveled to every single one of our partners, but we've also traveled to hundreds of other partners that are sort of second tier, third tier, and fourth tier. We only want to sort of manage 60 because it covers our gamut. But when one of those or a few of those 60 partners tend to either get acquired, which happens a lot, or they change their focus, well, we then go back into our second and third tier and start reevaluating them too. So we always have teams in other regions that are assessing these small to mid-sized service providers. But back to your question, again, we gather both hard and soft data. We scorecard it. We make recommendations based on how our partners score against that. And then we use our own internal experiences and understanding the decision making, the communication ability of the client, how they make decisions, how decisions get made, how they've run processes in the past, and we compare it to our top scoring partners. And then we make introductions, and then we lay out a framework on how the two entities can come together and embed and integrate and create an ecosystem. I think the biggest failure is clients' unwillingness to both invest in a relationship and an extension. They want this transactional sort of instance where they can just throw things over the wall and keep vendors at an arm's length. And that just typically does not result in the best outcomes. It hardly ever does. And in fact, what it does is it tends to lead to frequent turnover of vendors, because a lot of clients like that. A lot of clients like a scapegoat. They want when it hits the fan, they have someone to blame, and there's so many other options of supposedly better, faster, cheaper vendors that are pounding on their door. They switch and they have dug themselves out of a hole. This is actually a nice scapegoat for a lot of CTOs, in that's how they maintain their job, is by changing things all the time and being a leader, because I'm a change agent, which in reality is they're just a repeated failure.
Yeah, that is. It's funny timing that you mentioned that, because I have been seeing more and more of that over the past year, as it relates to certain decisions that have been made when it comes to even the technology stack that a business is on.
Sure.
If you go down that path for 6 months, 9 months, you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into it, to have to change course and go, that actually wasn't the right decision. Now with this new information, this is what we should be doing. You're not going to do that. And so
no, and a lot of it is
a bigger hole.
Not only choosing there's two elements to a successful globally distributed ecosystem. One is choosing a credible, legitimate, trustworthy, proven partner that has done exactly what you need them to do time and time again. Not promises, not PowerPoints, but legitimate vetting of these partners that have credibility, trustworthiness, proven ability to replicate what they've done repeatedly and what they do, what their sweet spot is time and time again. Just put me in that line and do the same for me, because this is what you really specialize in. This is the talent that you attract and retain, because they love doing that, and I need that, and do that for me. So you're mitigating a lot of the risk. The other thing is, again, is the client's necessity to invest in a servant leadership relationship. How can I, as a client, serve you now that I know that you're an expert in that and I need that? How can I invest in you to make me as successful as possible? How can I be your best client? How can I serve you to serve me? And that's, a lot of clients don't want to do that. They're just like, you know what? I'm going to believe your BS, and I'm going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to not really fully trust you and invest in you, and I'm going to expect greatness. How often does that happen? Hardly ever. I mean, you got to be so lucky to do that. And so we make clients get on planes during the due diligence, once they meet the partners a couple of times on video, and we prove to them that this partner really is an exceptional match. The clients need to get on the plane. They need to go over there. They need to experience the partner themselves. They need to break bread. They need to learn about people's, personal lives, because this is the kind of relationship of which people, will fall on the sword and exceed each other's expectations, because now they trust one another, they know one another, they like one another, they want to serve each other. And that's so lacking in most, vendor client relationships. Americans are so transactional, and we're so litigious. It's like, I just want X for Y, and if I don't get it, I'm going to sue you or not pay you. I'm like, you get what you deserve, right?
Yeah, there's definitely the aspect of you get what you pay for too.
Yeah,
the cheaper
exactly.
really not.
I mean,
better.
can I just touch upon that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the spectrum of things, if you look at cost and value, and you have companies that will do things in-house with full-time employees, that's a certain cost, right? And then you might outsource domestically, which is, hiring contractors. That's typically comes at a premium, right? Because you have the flexibility, but they're experts, and you're bringing them in, and they charge a relatively high hourly rate. And then you have boutique firms, that I guess charge just an exponential higher rate because they're boutique or whatever they've sold you. That's fine. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have global talent pool, which, by the way, 85% of software developers in the world live outside the US. So why not unleash that potential of a much larger talent pool to find hyper specialized talent? So if you unleash that, and maybe you find a partner that hires exactly that hyper specialized talent that you need, and that partner hires them, they vet them, they hire them, they train them, they retain them, they give them a great environment to work in. So it's a great way to scale without having to pick off individuals and then hoping that they all gel together, So on that other end of the spectrum, you have global talent, which comes at a price discount because there's so much more supply, right? And they're more hyper specialized. But within that, you have never lose on price, super cheap. I promise you everything. Talent is really sketchy. I'll try to cover that up for you. And then you'll find out 3 or 4 months down the road, and things will start unraveling, and things aren't really bad. I mean, that's the way the world is. You got the super cheap, then you got the mid, and then you got the hyper specialized expert. And the difference on the global side is that the difference between bad and good is just a few dollars. Where in America, the difference between bad and good could be $200 an hour. But if I'm going to go to Asia, for example, and I'm like, yeah, I've heard I can find people for $5 an hour. Yeah, and you're going to waste time, spaghetti code, rework, change, suing, IP loss. There's so many things that can go wrong with going super cheap. But if you go relatively expensive, but still cheaper than the US, those few dollars gets you a lot of benefits. Gets you a great environment, great talent, great vetted, hyper specialized talent, processes, accountability. I mean, so many things. So, I mean, my suggestion for the audience is go offshore, but go relatively expensive offshore. You're getting the benefit of less than domestic. You're opening up a global talent pool, but you're also paying for risk mitigation.
At what size or stage would you say it makes sense for a company to look to offshoring? And do you think that there needs to be a technical leader in place, domestically on the team in order to start outsourcing?
Well, I would recommend the earlier the better, assuming that the company is willing to build a not an offshore development team, but a global development team. That means onshore, domestic, offshore, no borders, fully empowered team that are distributed. I mean, look, we're distributed here in the U.S. You're in Miami, right? You might have team members in Denver and LA and Seattle, and Mexico and Chile and South Africa and Asia. Does it really matter? I mean, these are just words. These are just names of different countries which have, political borders. Just ignore them and build teams. Obviously, you have to take into account time zone and alignment and coordination and stuff. But we're getting better with tools to handle that. There are instances when you might have teams in different time zones, that so they can coordinate real time. That's always a benefit. But to answer your question, the earlier you can have this mindset of taking advantage of 100% of the global talent, and maybe taking advantage of partners that are proven, of acquiring and training and retaining that talent for you, so you can scale faster. You can depend on one entity who can bring in multiple resources that share a common culture, so you don't have to acculturate each individual in each different location and try to get them drinking the same Kool-Aid. So that's one benefit of working with a partner. Partners obviously have a profit margin too. But again, it's like, what are you an expert in? What are they an expert in? They're an expert in compiling similar types of individuals that are all vetted and have a common culture, and that's the culture that aligns with your culture. So you just sort of automated and accelerated the ability to scale a team that you can work with.
And then, when it comes to working with a third-party provider versus going directly to the individuals, I assume it's relatively easy to sort of scale up and scale down depending on needs and at that time, versus if you were going direct, there's lag in anything that you're going to be doing.
Yeah. So two answers to that. One is, not everyone needs a team. And if you need a team, then I highly recommend using a partner, because again, you're not an expert in compiling global teams, managing global teams. The partner can bring a lot of subject matter expertise on how to do this, because one, they've done it with many, many, many clients, and they've learned and they failed, and you should take advantage of that. That's what you're paying for, right? But there's other instances when people need individuals, and by all means use the platform. But when you're trying to create an ecosystem that is highly effective and continually improving, has all those elements, then you should use a partner. And the other part of, I'm trying to remember, the other part of the question is,
like being able to sort of scale up and scale.
Oh yeah, scale up and scale down. Yeah. So for a global service provider, there is so much more value in maintaining and building the longevity and continuity of a relationship. So understandably, sometimes you have to scale down to zero, but you also understand that by scaling down to zero, you're losing the acculturation, you're losing the knowledge transfer, and it can be there for you in the future. But for a service provider who has a true relationship with the client, they're typically more than happy to scale up and scale down on demand, because a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. If they can maintain some sort of level of knowledge retention and services to the client, that's more valuable than them trying to find another new client in a highly competitive world.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I guess one last question before we wrap up here. If there were any tips or tricks that you would give to, the audience that's listening when it comes to going through this process, because, even if they don't go direct, they still have to, vet the party that they'll, work with. And there's, obviously really great service providers like the 62 that you've, certified and mentioned, but, what are things to look out for the ones that maybe aren't so great? Because there's obviously a lot of companies that are like this. And what are some of the, I guess, red flags or things that people should be paying attention to?
Okay, sure. So today, if you were to do a search, there is approximately 30,000 software development agencies around the world. And that may just seem, it should seem overly daunting to anyone saying,
Yes.
okay, where do I start? And even like the platforms, if there's a system, it's going to be gamed. All the platforms are gamed because they can be. So the service providers will somehow figure out how to leapfrog each other. And it's like answering an RFP. What do you expect the answers to be? Oh, we can't do any of the way you're. No, the answers are always, yes, we're amazing at that. We do exact, and we can do whatever the RFP says. And so that's the way platforms are run too. So not to scare the audience off, but if they were to venture out and start to vet, maybe even someone recommended to them, maybe by a friend. Unfortunately, friends often recommend things when they shouldn't be recommending things, but they feel like they need to give an answer, and therefore that's where the trouble starts.
I've definitely gotten those recommendations.
Yeah. It's like, how do you get from A to B? It's like, well, you take a left here, you take a right here, and does the person really know how to get there? But they're going to give you directions anyway. But if you get in there, I would say you got to make sure that they have a breadth and a depth of business thought and practice leadership. Typically, most of these companies are fronted by one, maybe two individuals that try to dominate the interaction and conversation. And it's literally, these are literally house of cards. So you need to talk to the owners of the business, the strategists and the thought leaders of the business. Make sure that there's redundancy in that, and also the practice leaders. The program managers, the technical stack leaders, the vertical leaders. Make sure that there is adequate redundancy, because if you go through that, the reality is, in the world, smart people surround themselves with smart people. And if there's not enough of those things, that means they're just trying to fake their way through a sales process and hopefully get you in a point of weakness where you just like are running out of time. You don't want to talk to someone else, and you're basically wishing and hoping this works out. And you never want to be in that position. You need to do the due diligence. The other thing is trust but verify on everything you do. And that is, as I said before, getting on a plane. I don't want to get on a plane. We have Zoom. I don't need to get on a plane. You do need to get on a plane, because if in fact you end up choosing this relationship and you never create a true relationship, you are going to be prioritized lower than other clients who have gone to the effort of actually building a relationship. You're always competing, you're not just paying for services, you're competing with a service provider to be a better client than someone else. That's why I always recommend servant leadership. What can I do to help you? It's like, man, no clients ever ask me that. Thank you very much. How can I empower you? How can I give you the accountability to make decisions on your own? It's like, oh man, we're not just a widget for you, following through on tasks and activities. No. And so that's the kind of environment you really need to create. And those are three things that I would recommend. Not the only three things, but I think three things that really cut through.
Yeah, I think meeting in person is so crucial in any business relationship. For me,
hey, old school is new school, or new school is old school, and that is you're not an expert in everything. You may be an expert in one thing. It's who you know and who you trust and who is credible. Ask them. And make sure that it's in their sweet spot too. Surround yourselves by experts. It'll honestly, trying to go cheap and do it yourself is not the way to success. And I think you recognize this too. I've looked at your network, and so you surround yourself, and you're relatively young. You're already surrounding yourselves by experts, and you're already talking to experts. That's the fastest way to success. I mean, if you want to if you want to try to win in the pennies and nickel world, then do everything yourself, be super cheap, and be very transactional and very litigious. If you want to scale and live a life of abundance, surround yourself with experts and immediately call them in, saying, I know X, but I need A, B, and C, and you guys I trust and are credible. Please tell me what to do.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, but before we hop, can you let everybody know where they could find you online if they want to connect and learn more?
Sure. Two things, Accelerance.com, ACCELERANCE, Andy at Accelerance. If you go to our website, you'll see a lot of white papers, research reports, and ways to do due diligence and select partners and build an ecosystem. I'm always available to advise anyone. I think I'm at a point in my life when I get more pleasure out of transferring knowledge and helping others to learn than anything. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate you coming on. For everybody listening, this is Brandon Amoroso, and you can find me at brandonamoroso.com or scalus.ai. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brandon.